When we talk about faith, many of us recall moments in our lives when there seemed to be no way out. Situations of pain, uncertainty, illness, family conflicts, or even the silent weight of loneliness. It is in these moments that the human heart seeks a strength that goes beyond the visible, something that surpasses what the eyes can see. This strength, for the Catholic Christian, is found in God, and also in the powerful intercession of those he sends as guardians and protectors. Among these protectors, Saint Michael the Archangel holds a special place, for he is the Prince of the heavenly hosts, the one who defends inner peace, strengthens faith, and leads souls to the path of the Lord. The prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is one of the oldest and strongest instruments of Catholic spirituality. It was composed to be a shield against the forces of evil and also a source of serenity for those who recite it with devotion. For many adults and elderly people who have already gone through decades of life, the marks of time bring memories of battles won, but also of wounds still open. The prayer to Saint Michael then becomes a way of handing these struggles to God, trusting that even when everything seems lost, he sends a powerful defender to take care of each beloved child. Praying to Saint Michael the Archangel is not just repeating words, but diving into a deep trust that God does not abandon his own. Imagine, for example, a mother who carries in her heart the pain of a child who has drifted away from the faith, or a father who spends sleepless nights worried about debts, health, or insecurity, or even a grandmother who feels the weight of age and fears the loneliness of quiet afternoons. In all these situations, Saint Michael appears as a friend and ally. His mission is to remind us that we are never alone, that heaven fights for us when we no longer have strength. This certainty fills the heart with inner peace and strengthens faith in God. To understand the strength of the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel, it is necessary to remember who he is. His very name, in Hebrew, means "who is like God." This expression is not just a beautiful title, but an exclamation of humility and adoration. Faced with the arrogance of evil, which always seeks to put itself in God's place, Michael proclaims that there is no one greater, no one more powerful, no one more worthy of being adored than the Lord. This proclamation is, in itself, a teaching for us. In our daily struggles, we need to repeat this same phrase in our hearts. When problems seem enormous, when sadness feels uncontrollable, when temptations approach, just remember, who is like God? The prayer to Saint Michael was encouraged by the Church at various moments in history, especially in times of great difficulty. Pope Leo XIII, in the 19th century, after a spiritual vision that deeply impressed him, composed a special prayer asking for Saint Michael's intercession against the evils of the world. Since then, many Catholics frequently recite this supplication, certain that the Archangel continues to be sent by God to defend those who cry out in faith. In practice, the prayer does not need to be long or complex. What matters is the disposition of the heart. When we say, "Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil," we are not just repeating words, but placing ourselves under divine protection. It is like a child running into the arms of the Father when feeling afraid. Prayer is that run, an act of trust and abandonment in God. And it is important to understand that the battle spoken of in the prayer is not just something distant, a great spiritual event outside of us. It also happens within each person. There is an inner struggle between faith and doubt, between hope and despair, between trust in God and the temptation to give up. Saint Michael, when invoked, does not only fight against external forces, but helps the heart to rediscover inner peace. He is like a light that penetrates the shadows of the mind, reminding us that God is greater than any affliction. Many faithful testify to the strength of this prayer. There are stories of people who, in moments of deep anguish, felt immediate relief after asking for Saint Michael's intercession. Others recount that, after praying constantly, they managed to overcome addictions, find reconciliation in the family, or recover lost spiritual health. These testimonies are not coincidences, but signs that prayer is, in fact, a channel of grace. And God's grace never arrives too late. It comes at the right time, at the moment the heart is ready to receive it. Praying to Saint Michael the Archangel is also an invitation to perseverance. Just as a farmer needs to water the land day after day before seeing the fruit, prayer needs to be constant. Sometimes the middle-aged adult or the elderly person feels they have prayed a lot, that they have asked many times, and still have not seen the answer. But it is precisely at that moment that prayer becomes most precious. It not only prepares the external miracle, but transforms the interior. While waiting, the soul gains resilience, patience, and serenity. And this inner transformation is, in itself, a victory. Inner peace. This is one of the great promises of the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel. In such an agitated world, full of noise and news that bring fear, peace seems rare and distant. But when we place ourselves before God and ask for the protection of His angels, something changes within us. The heart, once restless, begins to calm down. The mind, which was spinning in circles, finds rest. The faith, which seemed fragile, rekindles like a living flame. This peace is not the absence of problems, but the certainty that, despite the problems, God is in control. If we look at the life of faith of so many devoted Catholics, we will see that prayer is like an anchor. It keeps the ship of life steady, even when the waves are strong. Saint Michael the Archangel, in this sense, is like a lighthouse. He illuminates the path, points to God, shows that it is worth moving forward. Even as the years pass, even as the body weakens, faith remains as a renewing force. And this is what keeps the spirit alive. When we pray to Saint Michael, we also learn to live with humility. Just as he proclaimed, "Who is like God?" we too are called to recognize our limits and hand everything into the Lord's hands. This simple gesture of surrender brings lightness. Many elderly people, for example, carry in their hearts regrets or old wounds. Prayer becomes a space to place everything before God, believing that the Archangel helps us to let go of the weight we no longer need to carry. Faith thus becomes a balm for the weary soul. Another profound aspect of prayer is the sense of community. When praying, we are not alone. Thousands of Catholics around the world also ask daily for Saint Michael's protection. It is as if our voices united in a great spiritual chorus, echoing in heaven. This communion gives strength, knowing that we are not isolated, but part of a living church full of faith fills the heart with courage. When an elderly person prays in the silence of their home, they're united with so many other brothers and sisters who also pray in silence. It is an invisible, yet powerful, network sustained by faith in God. The prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is also a way of educating the heart for heaven. Often, we spend our energy running after fleeting things. But faith invites us to look to the eternal. When praying, we are reminded that our life has a greater destiny, communion with God. This reminder brings comfort in the face of losses, hope in the face of illness, and strength in the face of death. For we know that Saint Michael, the one who fights for us here, will also be the one to guide us at the hour of departure to eternity. It is inspiring to think that every word of this prayer echoes in the heart of God. Even when we're tired, even when we feel we have no more strength, every supplication rises like incense. Saint Michael takes our request to the Lord, and the Lord, in His infinite goodness, gives us the necessary grace. This dynamic of trust and response creates a firmer spiritual life, capable of facing the challenges of existence with serenity. And here is a central point. Praying to Saint Michael the Archangel is not seeking a human hero, but opening oneself to the power of God through a faithful intercessor. He is only the messenger, the warrior sent. Victory always comes from the Lord. But what comfort it is to know that we have such a faithful friend in heaven, a tireless protector who accompanies us in every battle. This renews faith and inspires us to move forward, even on the darkest days. Thus, the first step to understand the powerful prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is precisely to recognize that it is a call to total trust in God. It is not magic, it is not superstition, but it is living faith which puts the soul in tune with heaven. Each time this prayer is made with devotion, a door of light opens in the heart. And it is through this door that inner peace, renewed hope, and the certainty that God is always present enter. As we advance even more in understanding the powerful prayer of Saint Michael the Archangel, it is necessary to look into the human heart. Many adults and elderly people, after so many years of life, carry with them deep experiences, joys lived, families built, losses suffered, battles fought. Each mark of time is like a scar that holds stories. And along with these scars, there often also exists a silent need to find comfort and meaning. It is there that prayer becomes a path of inner healing, a response from heaven to the restlessness of the soul. Saint Michael the Archangel, in his mission as defender of the people of God, does not act only as a warrior against external forces. He also assists in the process of transforming the interior. When someone puts themselves in prayer, especially with sincerity, they make room for the heart to be visited by God's grace. This grace brings serenity, eliminates unnecessary fears, calms anxieties, and strengthens faith. How many times do we feel that we are in the midst of an invisible battle? Sometimes, without realizing it, we allow ourselves to be dominated by exaggerated fears, as if they were greater than the Lord. But Saint Michael comes to tell us that there is no evil, no anguish, no illness, no loneliness that is greater than God. This awareness renews the soul, brings inner peace, and restores lost balance to the heart. The prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is also an invitation to full trust, and trust is a daily exercise. Imagine, for example, an elderly person facing the weight of physical limitations. Health is no longer the same. Steps have become slower, and the mind sometimes finds itself dominated by worries about the future. In this scenario, prayer becomes a refuge. Each time it is recited, the soul finds new strength, not because problems disappear, but because faith makes them seen in a new light. It is as if prayer said, "You are not alone. Heaven is at your side." This certainty is a source of courage, and courage is one of the most beautiful fruits that the prayer to Saint Michael can generate. Courage to face difficult days, courage not to give up in the face of losses, courage to trust even when answers seem delayed. The heart, strengthened by faith, begins to see beyond the present moment. It looks to the future with hope, knowing that God has already prepared a path of victory. It is interesting to note how many Catholics report experiences of deep transformation after adopting the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel in their routine. Some have found reconciliation in family relationships broken for years. Others claim to have regained the inner peace they believed lost forever. Some say that by praying daily, they felt as if a shadow had been lifted from their lives. These testimonies are not just isolated stories. They reveal the constant action of God's grace in the lives of those who open themselves to the power of prayer. But prayer also requires discipline. Just as caring for physical health requires daily effort, caring for spiritual health requires perseverance. It is not enough to pray once and expect everything to change. It is in constant habit, in daily repetition, that the heart is molded. Saint Michael teaches us this. Spiritual victory does not come from one isolated battle, but from faithfulness in each small struggle of daily life. And for many middle-aged adults or the elderly, this discipline becomes even more necessary, for it is in this period of life that the greatest reflections on the meaning of existence arise. And the meaning for the Catholic Christian is always God. Everything we live, achievements, pains, silences, find a greater purpose when placed before the Lord. Saint Michael the Archangel is, in this context, the one who helps us keep our gaze fixed on what is essential. He reminds us that it is not worth wasting energy on empty disputes, on old grudges, or on attachments that only weigh down the heart. The true treasure is faith, and it is faith that guarantees us inner peace. Another important aspect of the prayer to Saint Michael is liberation, not only from spiritual evils, but also from invisible chains that bind us to the past. How many elderly people carry resentments from decades ago? How many adults silently harbor feelings of guilt, anger, or regret? These burdens make the heart weary and steal serenity. When one turns to Saint Michael, one also asks for help to release these chains. He, as a heavenly warrior, cuts the ties that keep us bound to what is already past. And by doing so, he returns to the heart the lightness of trust in God. It is important to emphasize that this liberation does not happen only immediately, but often gradually. Just as water slowly wears down stone, constant prayer gradually transforms the soul. Each recitation is like a drop falling on a hardened heart, softening it, preparing it to receive full grace. This patience is essential, especially for the elderly, who often feel in a hurry to see changes. But over time, they realize that the greatest miracle is not the solution of external problems, but the inner peace gained during the process. Prayer also awakens gratitude. By invoking Saint Michael, many realize how often they have been protected without even knowing it. How many times was an accident avoided, a wrong decision reviewed, a danger averted? The faithful, by recognizing these graces, learn to give thanks more, and gratitude opens the doors to even more blessings. The heart that gives thanks is more willing to perceive God's love in everything, in a grandchild's smile, in a light breeze of the afternoon, in the memory of a happy moment from the past. Faith, when strengthened by prayer, also becomes testimony. Many adults and elderly, by persevering in the prayer to Saint Michael, end up inspiring children, grandchildren, and friends. The silent example of someone who prays every day, even with the pains of age, speaks louder than many words. It is like a flame that remains lit despite the wind, showing everyone that it is possible to live with serenity and trust, even in the midst of difficulties. Saint Michael the Archangel, therefore, is not only a personal protector, but also a sign for the community. When someone turns to him, they are helping to keep the faith of the church alive. Every prayer said in the silence of the home contributes to strengthening the mystical body of Christ, which is made up of all the faithful. This awareness brings dignity to the act of praying. Even the most fragile elderly person in their bed may be spiritually sustaining the lives of many through their faithfulness in prayer. Therefore, the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is, above all, an act of love. Love for God, love for one's own soul, love for those who will come after us. It is an act of trust that crosses generations, linking the past to the present and preparing the future. When a grandmother teaches her grandchild to pray to Saint Michael, she is planting a seed that may bloom decades later. This spiritual inheritance is one of the greatest legacies one can leave. And it is precisely this legacy that transforms prayer into something more than a personal moment. It becomes a chain of faith that does not break with time. Parents teach it to their children, children pass it on to their descendants, and thus the prayer continues to echo. Saint Michael remains, throughout the generations, as the one who protects, inspires, and leads. By reflecting on all this, we realize that prayer is not just a religious practice, but a true school of life. It teaches patience, humility, gratitude, courage, perseverance. Each time someone recites it, they are being educated in the spirit, prepared to face not only visible battles, but also invisible ones. And this learning never ends. Even in old age, there's always something new to learn, always something new to surrender to God. In the end, the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is a constant reminder that faith is not a burden, but a strength. It is not a cold obligation, but an opportunity for an encounter with the love of God. When an adult or elderly heart discovers this truth, it finds new vigor to keep walking. Life, even in its final years, gains a renewed glow. And this glow is the presence of God reflected in the soul. As we go deeper into the meaning of the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel, we realize that it is not only an individual supplication, but also a call to a life in communion. Catholic faith is never isolated. It is strengthened in sharing, in testimonies, in community life. When a faithful person prays to Saint Michael, they are spiritually united with millions of other brothers and sisters around the world who make the same prayer. This union creates an invisible but real bond that gives spiritual support to each one. Thus, prayer is not only a personal defense, but also a collective fortress. Many middle-aged adults and elderly have already experienced throughout life the strength of community prayer. Just remember the masses where the entire community gathered to ask for rain in times of drought or to give thanks for a bountiful harvest. How many family rosary gatherings marked the childhood of so many people? How many processions, novena prayers, and moments of shared faith transformed villages, neighborhoods, and cities? Saint Michael the Archangel, invoked in these moments, has always been perceived as the guardian not only of individuals, but of entire communities. This community dimension brings special comfort, knowing that we are never alone, that we are part of something greater, sustained by the love of God. Within this perspective, the prayer to Saint Michael is also a call to hope. Hope not only in the sense of waiting passively, but in the deep Christian sense, the trust that God is already acting, even when we do not see the signs. This hope is fundamental for the elderly, who often carry in their hearts the weight of losses, longing, and physical limitations. By praying, hope is rekindled, reminding us that life does not end here, but opens to eternity. Saint Michael is par excellence, the one who accompanies the soul at the moment of passing, leading it into the presence of God. Therefore, for many Catholics, this prayer is also a serene preparation for eternal life. Faith teaches us that we should not fear death, but prepare for it. And the prayer to Saint Michael is one of the most beautiful means of preparation. Not because it brings fear, but because it brings trust. Trusting that at the decisive moment, there will be a heavenly protector at our side is a reason for great inner peace. This trust allows us to live the present with more lightness. After all, if even at the last moment we will not be alone, why fear the now? This is one of the great lessons that prayer offers, to live each day with serenity, knowing that God is taking care of everything. Another inspiring dimension of prayer is the struggle for purity of heart. In today's world, marked by so many distractions, negative news, and temptations, keeping the heart clean seems increasingly difficult. But it is precisely here that Saint Michael presents himself as a defender. He fights the snares of evil that try to take the human heart away from peace. And this battle is not only against great sins, but also against small daily temptations. Impatience, discouragement, lack of forgiveness, loss of hope. Each time the faithful ask for Saint Michael's intercession, they renew the decision to remain firm on God's path. And this constant effort is what forms a strong and confident heart. For many elderly people, this purity of heart is manifested in simplicity. After so many years, they realize that material things pass, that possessions are lost, but what remains is faith. Prayer then becomes more essential than ever. It becomes the daily nourishment of the soul, that which gives meaning to each morning and each night. Praying to Saint Michael is, therefore, a way of keeping this simplicity alive, recognizing that everything comes from God and everything returns to Him. This awareness generates a deep sense of gratitude, reflected in small gestures of kindness, in words of encouragement, and in serenity in the face of difficulties. It is beautiful to realize how prayer transforms even the way we face pain. How many elderly people live with chronic illnesses, physical limitations, and constant pain. The prayer to Saint Michael does not promise the immediate elimination of these pains, but offers something greater: the grace to endure them with dignity and peace. When suffering is placed before God, it ceases to be just a burden and becomes an offering. And this offering, united with prayer, strengthens the soul. That is why so many saints, even in the midst of great suffering, manage to radiate joy and hope. They discovered that prayer opens a secret path of strength that comes directly from God. This strength is what allows forgiveness. Forgiveness is perhaps one of the greatest battles of Christian life. Many elderly people carry in their hearts memories of injustices suffered, of harsh words received, of betrayals and disappointments. Keeping these resentments, however, only increases the weight of the journey. Saint Michael, when invoked, helps the heart to release these burdens. He reminds us that forgiveness is not a favor we do for the other, but a gift we give to ourselves. It is through forgiveness that we find true inner peace. Prayer, in this sense, is like a key that unlocks the chains of bitterness, allowing the soul to breathe again. Another essential aspect of prayer is trust in divine providence. How many middle-aged adults face financial worries, job insecurity, or family responsibilities that seem endless? The prayer to Saint Michael is a reminder that nothing escapes God's sight. If he cares for the birds of the air and the flowers of the field, how much more will he care for his children? This trust does not eliminate human responsibility, but transforms the way we deal with challenges. Instead of despair, serenity is born. Instead of fear, courage arises. And this trust also generates creativity. The faithful, relieved of anxiety, find strength to seek new solutions, new possibilities, always enlightened by faith. Praying to Saint Michael is also learning to value silence. In a noisy world, full of external and internal sounds, silence becomes a rare blessing. But it is in silence that God speaks most clearly. When the elderly person, for example, dedicates a few minutes to this prayer before sleep, they create a space of inner silence where the voice of God can echo. This silence brings rest to the tired mind and peace to the restless heart. It is in silence that faith is renewed and trust flourishes. Saint Michael teaches us that many times the greatest victory is not to speak, but to listen to God, to listen to one's own conscience, to listen to what the heart truly desires. This silence is also a space of contemplation. Contemplation is the ability to see God's presence in everything. In the sunset, in a grandchild's gaze, in the simple gesture of a neighbor offering help. The prayer to Saint Michael opens the eyes to this contemplation. It takes the mind away from excessive worries and places it in tune with the eternal. Thus, even the simplest moments of daily life become opportunities to experience the loving presence of God. An inspiring example can be found in so many elderly women who, even without much schooling, carry deep spiritual wisdom in their hearts. They learn to pray from an early age, and throughout their lives, they never abandon this practice. Today, each rosary prayed, each prayer to Saint Michael, is like a treasure stored in heaven. This silent fidelity sustains not only their own lives, but also those of their families. How many children and grandchildren are protected by the silent prayers of these mothers and grandmothers? It is the strength of faith passed on from generation to generation, sustained by trust in God and the help of Saint Michael the Archangel. This transmission of faith is one of the greatest miracles we can witness. It is not a spectacular miracle, but is constant and profound. Each time a grandchild learns to pray with their grandmother, each time a child sees their father bend his knees in prayer, a seed is planted. That seed may remain hidden for years, but one day it will sprout. And when it sprouts, it bears abundant fruits of faith, hope, and love. Saint Michael, as protector of the Church, accompanies this process, ensuring that the flame of faith never goes out. As we reach the end of this reflection on the powerful prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel, it is impossible not to perceive how much it leads us to the essential. Full trust in God, the inner peace that is born of faith, and the certainty that we are not alone. Praying to Saint Michael is not just repeating words, but entrusting the soul to a faithful guardian who reminds us at every moment, who is like God. This phrase, which accompanies the very name of the Archangel, echoes as a cry of faith and humility that sustains hearts in the most challenging moments. Human life, especially for those who have already gone through many decades, is made up of memories, joys, but also pains. Many elderly and middle-aged adults know what it means to lose loved ones, face illnesses, deal with physical limitations, and carry worries that seem endless. It is in this context that prayer becomes a restoring force. Saint Michael does not remove the weight of life, but helps to carry it with dignity. He reminds us that suffering is not a sign of abandonment, but an opportunity for even deeper union with God. This awareness changes everything. Pain does not cease to exist, but it ceases to be an unbearable burden. It becomes a path of faith. And faith, when nourished by prayer, bears concrete fruits. How many people discover unexpected serenity after weeks of constant prayer? How many couples find reconciliation? How many children, once distant, return closer? These fruits are signs that prayer is not empty. Even when it seems that nothing is happening, something is being transformed within. And this transformation, often silent, is the greatest miracle. The restless heart calms, the anxious mind finds rest, and the soul discovers a new joy. Prayer, little by little, molds the spirit into the image of Christ. Saint Michael, as Prince of the Heavenly Hosts, also teaches us about courage. The courage to face the day with confidence, even when everything seems uncertain. The courage to continue believing in God, even when the world shouts the opposite. The courage to remain firm in the Catholic faith, even in the face of criticism and misunderstandings. This courage is a gift that springs from prayer. The faithful who place themselves under the protection of Saint Michael discover that they need not fear. They know that evil does not have the last word, that darkness cannot extinguish the light, that death is not the end, but a passage to eternal life. It is in this certainty that many elderly people find comfort in the face of the nearness of death. For those who believe, death is not defeat, but victory. It is the moment of returning home, of resting in the heart of God. Saint Michael, at that moment, is invoked as the soul's guide and protector. This trust brings inner peace because it drives away the fear of the unknown. The faithful know they will not be alone, that the Archangel will guide them safely. This hope transforms the last years of life into a time of serene preparation, without despair, but with calm trust. Furthermore, the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel reminds us of the importance of humility. Humility to recognize our limits. Humility to place in God's hands what we cannot solve. Humility to accept that life is not under our control. This humility is not weakness, but wisdom. It is the same wisdom of those who have lived much and learned that true power lies in trusting in God. This humble surrender generates lightness. The heart that trusts frees itself from unnecessary burdens and discovers a new freedom, even in advanced years. Another fruit of this prayer is gratitude. How many elderly people, by praying daily, realize how much they have already received from life? Children, grandchildren, friends, experiences, even difficulties that taught valuable lessons. Gratitude transforms the vision of reality. Instead of looking only at what is lacking, the heart learns to see what has already been given. This gratitude, united with prayer, generates contentment and joy. And this joy is contagious. Those who live with a grateful elderly person feel that there is something different about them, a serenity that inspires, a sparkle in their eyes that conveys faith and hope. It is at this point that the prayer to Saint Michael also becomes testimony. The example of someone who prays every day is stronger than 1,000 words. Children and grandchildren may even drift away from faith for a while, but they will hardly forget the image of a grandmother kneeling before the altar or of a father who begins the day in prayer. This silent testimony plants seeds that, sooner or later, will sprout. Prayer, thus, benefits not only the one who prays, but also future generations. It is a spiritual inheritance that remains alive, sustained by the power of God. Saint Michael the Archangel also reminds us of the importance of remaining firm in the midst of temptations. Even in old age, the human heart can be assaulted by feelings of discouragement, despair, or resentment. But prayer is a powerful weapon against these temptations. Each time the faithful ask for Saint Michael's intercession, they are reaffirming their decision to remain faithful to God. It is like lighting a light in the midst of darkness. And this light illuminates not only the faithful's own path, but also that of all who live with them. Faith lived with authenticity has immense power to transform environments and people. Deep down, all this reflection leads us to a central point. The prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is a path to experiencing inner peace. And peace is, perhaps, the greatest desire of the human heart. Peace does not mean the absence of problems, but the presence of God is this peace that makes the elderly person, even with physical pain, smile serenely. It is this peace that allows the middle-aged adult to face responsibilities and worries without despair. It is this peace that keeps the flame of faith burning, even in the dark nights of the soul. This peace is a precious gift, and prayer is the key to receiving it. At the end of this long reflection, it is possible to affirm with conviction. The prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel is one of the most beautiful ways of drawing closer to God. It strengthens faith, inspires trust, brings inner peace, and prepares the heart for eternity. It is not a magic formula, but a path of love and surrender. Whoever prays it with devotion discovers that, little by little, their life is being transformed. And this transformation is the greatest miracle. The human heart, fragile and limited, becomes a dwelling place for the presence of God. Therefore, may every adult and elderly person who reads these words find in them an invitation. Do not give up on prayer. Even on days of weariness, even when it seems that nothing changes, continue. With each supplication, with each word spoken in faith, a new grace is poured out. And Saint Michael, faithful protector, is always ready to take our prayers to the heart of God. He fights at our side, sustains us in our falls, inspires us in moments of weakness, and leads us to the final victory. May this prayer, therefore, be a daily companion. May it be present in the mornings when opening the eyes, in the silent afternoons when the heart seeks comfort, and in the nights before rest. May it be passed on to children and grandchildren as a treasure that never grows old. May it inspire courage, strengthen faith, and above all, keep alive in every heart the eternal motto, "Who is like God?" For, indeed, there is no one like him.